Today is the first in a series of videos in which I'm finishing my Mad Hatter costume. I designed this costume about a year ago to be my 2020 Halloween costume, and then when everything in the world stopped and it eventually became apparent there wouldn't be Halloween celebrations in 2020, I just didn't have the energy to keep working on the costume. But now I do, so I'm picking it up again. And this will be a long form project. So the first video of each month, I'll be checking in on progress on this. Today I'm going to be working on the coat. It's already partially completed, and I'll walk you through the design of the costume to see what we're going to be working on in the following months. I started working on this costume design in February of 2020, about a year ago, and I started, as usual, with rereading the source material, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, where I found 4 facts about the Hatter to lead my design. 1. He carries a strange watch that gives the day of the month, but not the time of the day. 2. He doesn't own his own hat. All the hats he makes are kept to sell. 3. He's been at tea since performing for the Queen of Hearts, literally not even having time to wash the dishes. And 4. He claims to be a poor man. Using all that and my own aesthetic sensibilities, I started looking for inspiration and sketching. Right away, I found an incredible pink fluffy wig on Etsy and started designing around it. A pink top hat I'd been collecting things for a few years earlier joined the look, as did a patchwork frock coat. The frock coat was always going to be involved, largely because I made a patchwork frock coat for a production of James and the Giant Peach a few years ago, and I have wanted one for myself ever since. So I sketched out a few neckline options and some shoes I didn't own, and decided I needed to second go. I thought the coat might be a bit too bland, so I started by just going nuts with color on the second version. I added a neck ruff, which I quickly decided against, kept the wig around but decided a pink hat on a pink wig was too much, and swapped in shoes that I already owned to try and keep my budget in control. For attempt number 3, I started from a vest fabric that I had already had in my stash, and worked from there, with the coat staying colorful, but in a more limited color palette of greens. I also ditched the wig for my natural hair, and found a hat idea that I loved. Staying true to his lack of a personally owned hat, I would use an antique hat box I found in an Etsy listing as my base inspiration. The hat box was made of a heavy cardstock or cardboard material, and had an amazing shape and a separate lid that tied on at the edges. I decided to recreate the box, add a brim, and call it a hat. I've even included a little door for the dormouse to nap behind, and loads of millinery floral. For the 4th design, I looked at what I'd been consistently adding. Floral on the hat and coat, dormouse on the hat, patchwork coat with doily collar, and big hair, and I started refining off of those locked-in elements. Look 4 still used shoes that I didn't own, so I sketched design 5 to see if I could pull my colors dark enough to use my black shoes without losing the vibe I liked about look 4, and I made the hat box black and the coat purple, but I just wasn't feeling it, so ultimately I went back to number 4 as my final choice. And that was all pre-pandemic last February. Around July, it started to look like we wouldn't be fully out of the woods, and I might need a mask for Halloween still. So I played around with mask design. I'd already done a lot of work on the coat at this point, but I started to lose steam, realizing that if mask mandates were still in place, then I really didn't want to go to a gathering anyway. So I boxed the project up, switched focus to a witch costume that was made almost entirely from stash fabrics I didn't have to pay for, and did a Halloween photo shoot instead of a party. Fast forward to January 2021. I started wanting to get back to work on this costume, but I used the vest material in my Christmas costume and realized that I'd been coloring the fabric wrong in all of my design sketches so far. So I thought maybe a found embroidery patchwork vest, but that turned out to be way too bland. I sketched out the original look with the accurate colors to see if the vest and skirt would clash terribly, and to see if I could weasel my American Duchess tango boots into the design. Maybe if I just added more red to the floral, and I didn't hate that look, but I think it just looks better with brown shoes. I still wanted to see what I could do to make the look work with these red tango boots, and that brings us to design number 8. The big change here is swapping the vest for a pink patchwork vest. So we got red shoes, pink vest, flowers all over the place, tying both colors in, and this finally is the look that I am going to go with for this costume. used Simplicity 4923 to make this coat. I've cut all the pieces out and done the patchwork already. Just so you know, this pattern is nowhere near historically accurate. It's just Simplicity's bid to get a bit of that Pirates of the Caribbean money. But I've made this coat before and I like the shape of it, so I used it. This is how I got all of my patchwork together for each pattern piece. I cut my pattern pieces out, and as I was constructing the panel for each piece, I had the piece next to me, I sewed together a row, held it up to the pattern piece, decided how many squares I needed in the next row, continued on that way, and then made sure to make them opposites of each other so that you didn't have the same side for each pattern piece, because you need mirror imaged. This is the front and back lining pieces. I've sewn the back seam and the side seams already on it. These are the cuff pieces. There's 8 of them all together. Then we have the undersleeve pieces and the upper sleeve pieces. And all the godets for the skirt of the coat. Then we have the back panels. And the front panels. And the rest of the pieces of the lining. As you can see, I've marked what layout I need to cut each piece in case I need to do it again. This is the godets, undersleeves, and oversleeves of the lining. And here's the collar. It's a pre-assembled collar, vintage off Etsy. I'll link the shop if I can find it. Now I'm ready to pick up from there. Starting out with the shoulder seams on the lining. And then jumping in to get those godets. Here's the undersleeve and upper sleeve being joined together. Since they're a curved sleeve, all of the seam allowances have to be clipped before they're ironed. And then they get a gathering stitch around the top of the sleeve so that it can be eased into the arm side. And then it gets stitched into the arm side. And that's the lining done. This little breast pocket is going to be a hand-stitched welt pocket, just because it's so small. I felt that it would be easy enough to hand-stitch. So stitching that pocket bag to the outside, clipping the opening for the welt, pushing it all to the inside, pressing, folding the welt up, making sure it's the right length and depth, and then stitching everything all in place. These larger side pockets I'm doing on the machine, just because there's a lot more stitching to get done. It's the same exact process though, stitching around the welt marker, clipping it, folding it inside out, pressing it, folding the welt up, stitching the pocket bag. Here I'm doing the center back seam on the outside, then I'm getting a side seam in there, and then a shoulder seam, and the side and a shoulder seam. Then I am attaching those godets to their skirt panels. Now I'm getting the upper sleeve and under sleeves sewn together. And set into the arm side. Now I'm getting the cuffs sewn together, right sides together in pairs. After they're in pairs and ironed flat, they get paired together. So you now have 4 of the original panels and sewn along that top edge. Then get clipped, turned right side out, pressed flat, so they're 1 cuff unit, well 2 cuff units total, and then they get stitched along the bottom just to keep them all sturdy while I wait to get them sewn onto the sleeves. Now I'm sewing the cuffs onto the sleeves. Here I'm stitching the collar onto the shell. This is a ready-made collar, so I'm just stitching the netting in on the shell so I can sandwich it between the lining and the shell. And now I'm attaching the lining to the shell all the way along the front edges and neckline. Just right sides together, sew it up like a sandwich, clip all the curves and corners, and right side out again. Now I am hand stitching the sleeve linings in at the cuff, covering up that raw edge from sewing the cuffs on. The way the pattern is written, it asks for you to sew the cuffs on so the seam allowance will be folded up and caught inside of the cuff, like on the outside of the sleeve between the sleeve and the cuff. But since I have a lining to hide it with here, I opted to do it the opposite direction, so I sewed it on, as you saw, with it already facing up the sleeve on the outside. Then I just understitched the seam allowance so it would go up into the sleeve and I could easily cover it with this lining. I'm sewing some patches onto this coat. I had more footage, but my camera dumped it because it ran out of memory. But you at least get one. They are just messily whip stitched around the edges. It is a simple process. Alright, so I spent the last week just putting a ton of time into this coat, and it is very close to being done, but I'm going to leave it here for now, because there are a few problems I came up against that I just wasn't anticipating, even though I totally should have been anticipating them, but they just weren't even on my radar. The biggest one is that I fit this pattern pre-pandemic. And I don't know about you guys, but my body's not exactly the same shape and size that it was pre-pandemic anymore. And the pattern still fits me. It's not a huge problem, but it's really boxy, and I'm just not feeling boxy right now. So I think I'm gonna go in and add a few darts on the front just to get a little more shape into it, make me feel a little happier when I'm wearing it. The fit on the back is great. The front just needs a little bit more shaping, and I have space to just add a few little darts at the waistline. So I'm gonna go in and do that. And I also am just not a big fan of these tiny little like quarter patch pieces showing up on the front edges here. So I think I'm gonna go in and just stitch those out so that it ends on a full patch. And there is enough space for me to do that, add the darts, and still be able to close it in the front with like a hook and eye or something, which works fine because I was planning on doing buttons on both sides that are not functional. Now with the buttons, I was thinking I was either going to do like brown wood tone and leather buttons or like abalone shell buttons. So if you guys have an opinion on that, sound off in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say on the matter. Another thing that I want to still do is add more patches. Like I have a few patches going on. But there's a lot more that I want to add. The struggle with patches is that the way I'm finding the colorful embroidery I'm using for patches is at thrift stores, estate sales, just getting a hold of like really damaged tea towels or handkerchiefs or things that have been embroidered but aren't really in a usable state anymore. So I can feel guilt-free about cutting bits of embroidery out of them. And that just takes a little time to collect, so I'm still working on that. So I'll be adding more patches on as it goes along. And then I'm just gonna add all the floral to all the pieces at the very end so I can see the whole outfit together and balance it out better. So that's not on the coat yet. But apart from those things, I'm really happy with how it's looking. I love the chaos of a fully patchworked garment. I'm happy with the cuffs. They're really large and ridiculous, and I can't wait to stuff one of them full of floral. Overall, success. Pockets look great, they blend right in. This one ended up in a good place, which makes sense since I did plan out where it was going. I know that I adjusted the height of the waist on this coat when I made the pattern fitting switches in the beginning, pre-pandemic. The waistline is still a little lower than I want it. It's very raised for a frock coat of this style, if you are familiar, because I wanted it to hit that exact waist spot on me where I wear my skirts, because I will be having a skirt with a lot of crinolines under this, so I wanted it to sort of skim out over. And it does work. I just have to pull the waist up a little bit. I don't think it's a change I'm gonna make to the pattern, just something I noticed with how it's fitting. So next time I will be making those changes, and I'll be making the skirt for this costume. So come on back the first Thursday of April if you want to see this guy get wrapped up and the skirt to go with it. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you have seen here and would like to see more, or you want to see how this coat turns out finished, make sure you come back by hitting that subscribe button. Helps me out a ton. And if you want to watch more of my stuff, I have some videos linked on the screen for you.